So, hello and welcome to the third episode of the vCD Roundtable. We are end of July. Hopefully we get the release out this time a bit faster. We get faster from release to release. If you want to follow us, subscribe to the channel, etc., you can do so on most of the modern podcast platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, etc. If you go to www.vcdroundtable.com, or you can find our YouTube channel where you can also subscribe to the video feed of this podcast. And that's also the place where you can actually send us any questions in regards to any of the sessions. We are not only writing end of July, we are also finally able to talk about the Cloud Director release 10.3, which is going to be the main topic of today. We didn't get any further questions from the last session, so that's going to be our main topic. But before we head into that, even though we are not yet complete, we hope the others are going to join. Let's start with a quick round of introduction. Who is who and what's your role? Let's start with Jörg, who skipped the last episode.
Yeah, so I'm Jörg Lev. I'm a technical product manager in VMware's Cloud Director team.
Toby.
Yeah, hi, my name is Tobias. I'm part of the Com division and mainly related for Nsx stuff.
Romain.
Yeah, hi, I'm Romain Decker. I'm a technical product manager also in the same team as Jörg, where I cover mainly everything networking.
And Matthias.
This is Matthias, also Com division, all around Cloud Director and automation.
Wonderful. And my name is Yves Sanford, and I'm also part of the Com division team and working on the overall architecture. So mid of July, finally 10.3 of Cloud Director hit the shelf, or it doesn't hit the shelf anymore. It actually just hits the MyVMware homepage, and then you can start downloading and implementing it. It has a set of new features. Primarily, quite a few of them are all around the networking space. So we cover some of them. But before we get into some of the networking features, I wanted to cover some of the other high-level ones. So one of them is a better Kubernetes integration. So we have more support for native Tanzu Kubernetes clusters and using them in combination with the Nsx data center group objects, which we have as part of vCD, and a few other enhancements on that side. Other than that, we also have some orchestrator improvements, which I think we decided that Jörg is going to quickly cover what's going to work again, or actually is improved.
Yeah, so there are two changes relating to the VRO integration into the vCD service library. So you remember within Cloud Director, there's a library section in the tenant portal that can be used by a provider to offer, well, first of all, catalog items, of course. So we have catalog, but you can also publish VRO workflows into the service library. And then tenant users can request services by in this menu, and then technically an orchestrated workflow is going to be kicked off in the backend. And this functionality, I think, was introduced in 9.1, vCD 9.1. And now it technically has been moved into one of the UI plugins of the Cloud Director portal. So you can now enable and disable that, or publish or unpublish the whole plugin for on a per tenant base, which gives you a better granularity to offer these services on a per tenant base. And then there have been some maintenance going on as well, because with VRO8, orchestrated changed a bit the APIs mainly for the input presentation. So that's for all the parameters that whoever starts the workflow, so the tenant user who requests a service in the portal has to fill in these input parameters. And some of these presentation options were not supported by vCD in past, and that should work now. In the same way as, well, backwards compatibility with VRO7. So all the workflows, and if you're still using VRO7, that all should work as and continue to work as expected. With that said, there's one thing that did not yet get updated. That is planned for the next release, which is the VRO, the vCD plugin in VRO. So the way how VRO can talk back to VCD. That is still the same version that has been out there since 10.01, I think. So it does support the latest version as well because of the VCD API backwards compatibility. So when you use VCD and VRO in this context, always, of course, check the compatibility metrics and the footnotes in there. But now the input presentation at least should work for VRO 8 as well.
Okay, so
and what I would like to add at this point, Jörg, is because the release notes of 10.3 clearly says with the newest API version, which is 37, which is currently an alpha build, the old /API/session login method won't be supported anymore. So again, the release notes said it for I don't know how many times since VCD 10 and I think API version 33 or 31, that this old authentication method is deprecated, and with version 37, it will be gone. So just make sure that you change the login for and authentication mechanism for the REST calls to the new Cloud API or Open API provided tenant and provider supported API calls.
Yeah, that follows the same sort of API deprecation model that we have for VCD. So as you mentioned, it has been deprecated since a few versions now. So typically you get like 1.5 years of time to update your clients who talk to the VCD API.
great, thank you. And Matthias, this doesn't actually allow you to move back to VRO 7 now. Although
Pardon me?
said that you could actually, in theory, go back to 7 again, but that's not an option.
No, the thing is, with a couple of weeks ago, the interoperability metrics changed, and VRO 8.3 patch 1, thanks to Jörg, is currently supported, even with VCD 10.2.x and 10.1, and VRO 8.3 patch 1 is highly stable, and I recommend upgrading to that version. I can add the build number to the chat window or something else, or even better, if the build number is now popping up here in the video.
It's not popping up there in the video, especially as it doesn't help people with the podcast. We will put it in the comment section of the video later on, because then people can also click on it and don't have to type it. Because that's the other disadvantage with some of the VMware links, is they just become very long. We will cover that. Another thing which we found out, we found that already during beta time, but confirmed it's there for the final release, is one of the changes for the appliances, and I know people are going to love it as well as some people are going to hate it, as always, is something has changed on the certificate side. Toby, I think you spent quite a bit of time playing around with that.
A little bit. Yes, finally the Java key store is dead. So we don't need to utilize the Java key store anymore for bringing in the console certificate and the web certificate. We can now utilize the cell management tool, and inside the cell management tool, we now have the ability to utilize our certificate in a PAM formatted stuff. So we need to have the certificate with the key and with the private key and with the certificate files, and then with the cell management tool, we can quickly import the certificates to our VCD, which is really a quick improvement or a cool improvement, because we don't need to create the Java key store anymore. So the Java stuff more and more moves out from VCD as well.
So I think that's definitely great news, and that's going to help people at least make that a bit easier, especially as the Java key tool is no longer the standard tool. As we head into the network section a bit, one of the changes, and it's actually just a small side note, but Romain, maybe you can point out why this is actually an important one, is we have more AV versions or Nsx Advanced Load Balancer. I'm still not sure if we are going to call it out now the AV versions or the NSXT Advanced Load Balancer or the Nsx Advanced Load Balancer, but at least we have more versions to choose from.
Yeah, right. So the official name is Nsx Advanced Load Balancer, but most people are still using RV because, well, it's the RV product, RV Vantage. So yeah, with vCD 10.2, we introduced support for RV 20.1.1 to do load balancing as a service for NSXT virtual data centers. And the main consideration and the main feedback that we got is that with RV 20.1.1, with NSXT Cloud in the RV configuration, you cannot decide in the UI where to place the service engines, so the data plane element. And 21.3 and 21.4 supports that. So that's why we added those versions.
Good. So that's, and I think the entering of the smaller license package or something like that was fixed in 3 or 4 as well, isn't it?
So until RV 21.2, it was a honor-based license mode, and 21.3 is starting to enforce actual licensing on the RV controller.
And I think that's at least the feedback I got from providers is very often they prefer if there is real license enforcement, because that reduces the risk of any surprises down the road. Speaking about networking, well, before we go into some of the bigger changes, actually, we also have Nsx Ipv6 support in the GUI. I'm not sure, Romain, Toby, who of you can actually talk to that a bit more in what's there. I think it was API driven only before, so we had the check mark for, hey, it's supported, but it was more or less, it's like, yeah, supported, but you had to actually issue API calls to even create a firewall rule or something like that. So is everything working now, or is it just in specific features?
What I have seen until now, so this is something I played a little bit around with IPv6 in vCD. What I see until right now is we have the full dual stack support, but I don't have seen yet, also here, since time is sometimes a little bit less, I don't think that we have right now the full support to go with IPv6 only. This is still only possible to be configurable via the API, but the full dual stack is already there.
Okay, so that's great news. The other thing is, and potentially one of you can talk to that, or Matthias can join in for that part as well, is we finally have the VApp edges back. I thought they will never come back, but it sounds like they are back. Does this mean we can, we also from a migration toolkit perspective can convert already, or is it just the feature set now, and then the next version of the migration kit will also allow us to migrate VApp edges?
Being honest, I haven't looked into that one. I just read the headline, which is awesome, but I would love to pass on that question to Romain.
Yeah. So it's and surprisingly, it was a feature that was that a lot of people waited for, and but based on the first assessment reports that we got from the assessment tool, not that many providers use VApp edges. So that's strange. So, and that's not on a couple of assessment reports. That's almost on 100 assessment reports, which is thousands and thousands of old VDCs. But still, we actually had to wait a bit for VApp edges because we had to take the NSBU approval, because we are actually doing something that NSXT was not initially, that they have not designed NSXT for that. So the VApp edge, when you connect a VApp network to an old VDC network, a new T1 gateway is instantiated, but that one is standalone. So it's not connected to a T0 gateway or to a VRF gateway. And we use the concept of service interface. So that's the new name for the centralized service port, the CSP that we had before. And so we connect like some kind of a headless T1 gateway to the overlay of VDC network, which is then connected to the T1, the regular T1, the edge gateway, and then to the external network, the T0 or the VF gateway. And they have done a good job because it's the same API and the same UI for VF edges.
The usage for that, Romain, you mentioned that it's not that heavily used in service provider context. Well, VF Edges is one of the main features, I think, that is used in enterprise VCD use cases. So when enterprise customers that are using VCD came from Lab Manager, for example, or even within our own OneCloud or hands-on labs environments, where you have VApps that are representing like an environment that you want to clone over and over again, and then the VApp edge is like the endpoint how this VApp internal network is connected to the outside. So that was a really awaited feature indeed, and I'm pretty happy to hear that it is sort of fully functional from the user experience perspective, even with UI and API. And since the APIs are actually the same as for the org edges, there's not a lot of development effort if you want to use them as part of your automation. So that's one thing for these VApp edges as well. When you have these VApp constructs in VCD and you clone them over and over again, that is typically something that is not triggered by a human user directly, but that is being deployed as part of a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline in a software development environment, or you have some Terraform definition and use Terraform to deploy that. And so it's very helpful to have the APIs consistent, so we can expect pretty soon support in the Terraform provider, for example, as well for that.
That would have been my next question. Is the Terraform 3.3 going to support that already, or is that going to be then the next release, most likely?
That's on the roadmap for the next release. Okay. For the Terraform provider, by the way, since it's an open source project, of course, you always can check the GitHub pages, and the Terraform team or the engineering team within VMware that maintains mainly the Terraform code. They are very open to publish the planned roadmap and discuss the roadmap in the GitHub issue section on the Terraform provider. Always worth to have a look at that. And if you need the functionality, of course, chime into the discussion and open an issue in the GitHub page.
Yeah, I think especially as you said, the VApp Edge feature, I know that it's discussed very often, has been discussed very often, and we internally have the same use case, similar to OneCloud, what VMware has. We have our own cloud within ComDivision where we provision exactly or similar things with a few thousand VMs every weekend over it. So we have exactly that same use case, which was one of the reasons why we couldn't move from V to T. Hall has it, the VMware Edu Cloud has it. So there are a few, and I was actually in a call with a North American university the other day, I think 2 weeks ago, and we had exactly the same use case because they use that for IT training. And so based on that, that is one of the scenarios. And back then I had to say, it's like, yes, we have the feature set, but I'm not yet sure if and how we are going to convert it. But that's good to know. So we need to look into how we do migrations and stuff like that around that. The biggest, or not the biggest feature, but I think one of the more important features to cover as well is that even though 10.2 had the distributed firewall for Nsx, we now have a distributed firewall, which is at least a bit. Yeah, I mean, it was useful technically before because you could create rules based on IP sets, but IP set based rules were always a bit of a challenge because especially when you want to build microsegmentation, you're really not in the game of actually building rule sets based on IP addresses in the first place. So we now have, as far as I remember, we have the opportunity to do tech-based, and we can do this name-based. So at least we can do something based on the name and tech of the individual machines. But what's important to note for everybody, if you are going to look into one of these features, is that actually the tags we are going to use here are VCD specific, but as far as I understood, Toby, you did some research, are going to be represented down to Nsx then as well. So you would see them down there as well, and have
this
them
is really, really an amazing stuff, especially for service providers, because yes, the tenant now can create his tags directly inside vCloud Director, but the tags are going to be replicated to Nsx. So especially from troubleshooting perspective and so on, if you know the tag, if you know the customer, yeah, okay, hopefully you'll be able to bring in these two informations, then you can absolutely directly look in your Nsx environment for troubleshooting if really the tag is applied on the VM and so on and so on. So this is nothing where we say, okay, we do some stuff inside vCloud Direct and then some generic tags will be handed over to Nsx. It is the same tag, but with some additional information. This is some stuff which is running under the hood, where if the customer creates the tag, then the tag gets instantiated inside Nsx, but also with the scope of the tenant. So there is some matching capabilities in the background, but from Nsx perspective, we really see all of the stuff, also the firewall rules, which we now can create inside the distributed firewall section. Also, the firewall rules are really handed over to Nsx, and we can easily match the firewall rule name from vCD to Nsx, and so we can really do an easy troubleshooting because we have the clear name on both worlds. So this is really amazing.
So I think that's good to know, and we played around with that part already quite a bit, and plan to potentially also do a few at least blog posts or videos on these feature sets, because I think this now finally makes the VFW fully usable. One of the questions we had discussing this with the service provider the other day already is there an easy way, and this is more going towards those who potentially now Terraform and some of the other stuff as well. Is there an easy way to actually have something like a standard rule set which a service provider could build and then actually copy that over into other tenants via Terraform or something else? I know Matthias is going to cry out orchestrator in the first place, but I know that firewall rules and orchestrators were not necessarily always the best friends in the first place. Jörg, do you have any insights, or Danielle, who showed up? And actually, we can make it his problem now. No, Jörg, any ideas? Is there anything? Has anyone heard? Because this was more or less an immediate question when we got us into the story. Is like here and now you can actually build this for your tenants and everybody else, and more or less an immediate question came is like, yeah, but I don't want to build this for every tenant individually then again. So do we know if Terraform is planning on anything, or?
Yeah, so currently there's no support for that yet in the Terraform provider, but the Terraform team has that on their roadmap to support the distributed firewall rules as well as part, so that you can have them as like infrastructure as code in the Terraform descriptions.
Yeah, because I think that would be easy because in some cases the providers have some other security tools as well, and so feeding into a Terraform file or a Terraform descriptor then actually would definitely make sense to cover those different bits and pieces. Good. Let me do a quick rundown on what we covered already, so that Daniel has a chance to join in and actually present whatever he thinks is a cool feature. So we spoke quickly already about the Kubernetes Tanzu enhancements. We spoke about the new certificate management of vCD. We spoke about the distributed firewall, as you obviously figured out from the last discussion, vApp edges. AVI versions, IPv6 support, VRO service library, and Terraform integrations with the newest version. What else do you think is a great 10.3 feature which we didn't cover yet?
I think the security thing and security handling and certificate handling, that's going to catch a few people off guard. And I actually wrote a blog post last week on that. There's this common appliance framework, platform framework that we're going on VMware for all appliances going forward, where we adhere to industry security standards. So with this release, we have to verify and validate the host name of any infrastructure resource. And within this release, we remove the ability to disable that validation for NSX managers. So if you're upgrading from whatever version, 10.2x or whatever it is to 10.3, and you do not, if your certificate from your NSX manager does not match the hostname validation, either in its FQDN or in a subject alternative name on that, a SAN name, it will fail. And this is probably not a big issue for production environments. I would hope it's not. I hope you're using certs in production, good certs in production. But I've seen this come up a few times, and I ran into it personally, and then I investigated with engineering, and we had a long conversation on that. So I think it's something that we will be, in this release, we remove the hosting validation for NSX Manager. You can still disable this for vCenters, but in the next release, and this is going to be in a hot patch too, it could be a minor release, we're going to remove that ability. So start using good certs that match at least where you're connecting to. So I think that's very important to talk about.
So there is one more thing, if I may. The NSXT FQDN in the NSXT cloud configuration in AVI needs to match the one defined in vCD. So if you do your workaround, Daniel, that you documented in the blog post, where you change the FQDN in vCD to match the certificate SAN, well, you have also to do it in the AVI NSXT cloud, but you cannot update the NSXT FQDN there. So it will not break anything until you want to add a new cloud. But I mean, it's potentially an issue later.
Okay, but that means in general that people, so at the moment it's just validating that the names are correct, but this more or less gives a bit of a feeling that in the future it might also do certificate validations in general. So I think it's finally the time where people need to learn how to change certificates on NSX, vCenters, and other bits.
Yeah, and it depends, because if you enable FIPS, for example, and also inside vCD you can enable FIPS, then you need to have a matching certificate, and also the trust must be instantiated. So it is already there. It is only taking some time until it really will be executed. So this is really something I plan to cover since ages, but we need to really now have a deeper look at all of the certificate stuff inside VMware product to point out how we can change certificates for vCenter, ESXi, and so on, because this more and more becomes important. Absolutely.
Yeah, and now we have the ability also to retrieve the certificate authority from the vCenter too. So that's another thing too. So if you're using a CA, you can import that into and trust that from a certificate authority within your identity management system. So there's a lot of new changes in that aspect, but this is, I think, an important concept that we need to make sure that people are aware of as looking to upgrade to 10.3 and later.
Yeah, I think it's overall, this is what we see in other products as well. And I'm still surprised. And I had these discussions on several engagements lately where even service providers came, it's like, why does our VCD need to have a public certificate? Where I mean, it's like, do we really need to have that discussion still? We have 2021. It's like, we shouldn't have this discussion in the first place anymore. And those were not the smallest service providers. That was the even more weird piece. I think the challenge overall is going to be in the long run on how are we going to maintain all of these certificates? Because one larger provider, which I was dealing with the other day, is their security team clearly came back as like, hey, it's not a problem to have certificates for every service, but just be aware that the maximum length we are giving out is 45 days. So that is then the other challenge you have is you more or less are with 45 days in a scenario that you need to automate it, which on the other hand is good that we have the new format and the new importer now for the certificates in the new appliances. But I think this is going to be more and more of a challenge because as security people at the same point in time, like we add more and more certificates, shorten the time windows continuously on how long certificates can actually play a role. That's definitely an area which is going to be interesting. The other question, which I would say is interesting. So I guess we have. I saw that cloud availability is also being updated already, or is at least compatible with the new version. No, I think it was updated, isn't it? So
pretty sure it's compatible.
Yeah.
Gosh, I hope so. I'm pretty sure it is. But
we will check before we launch this. Otherwise, I put a different note somewhere. But yeah, I think it's compatible. But and I think that's for most of the tools now. So it's not like in the old VCD versions where sometimes you had a VCD release and then you had to wait longer. I think third party is going to take a while, as always. It's like until we have the backup vendors and everybody else up to date. But that's the usual procedure. How do we look like with CDS? So with the hosted version of Cloud Director, is that following along 10.3 already, or is that a bit behind everything? Do we know where we are on that one? Anyone or?
I think I'm not completely sure. I think when you deploy new instances, you can select the current GA release version of VCD. However, I don't think that they have yet available upgrade for existing CDS instances towards 10.3.
Okay. So it's still case by case. Good.
Go back to your Cloud Director availability, interoperability with VCD. It is available. 4.2 came out right before 10.3, I want to say, if I recall correctly. So we had that QA, and I just checked. 4.2 covers everything from 10x to anything 10x. So all the way back support to 10.0 on that support. So we're good there.
Yeah, I think anything before 10 is becoming more and more of a challenge with the Flash plugin anyway. So,
yeah.
But that again doesn't stop people from using it. We had that discussion already. So that's good to know as well. Good. Anything else we have to cover on 10.3? I mean, it was quite a long list of features and packages, and I think that's really also clearly again showing to everybody is like and I still hear it from time to time, isn't VCD dead? No, it's not that. We have half-year releases, new features come out. It's like it's not only in maintenance mode, because that was the other term which I heard, I think, a couple of months back again. It's like, yeah, it's not that, but it's just maintained. It's like, no, there are new features coming out for it every half a year or something like that. So it shouldn't, and not even that. Even if we look at 10.2, it had quite a few network features. So even minor releases have from time to time new features. So that's good to know. Anything else in regards to 10.3? Does anyone know already of any known issues, which you, I mean, besides the ones which Daniel actually pointed out, which we should warn people of? It's like, no, not about why not to upgrade, but at least to avoid any pitfalls. I mean, that's the good use case of a videocast or a podcast, that we can warn people of actually not going to make the same mistake as others. So anyone have any ideas yet, except for the certificate issues? Or not issues, it's a security improvement. It's not an issue.
I'm gonna be limited on this one. This is posted in a public forum. But there is one other thing that I'm in the vein of certificate management that I ran into, and we're gonna add in a KB article on this, is LDAP settings for upon upgrade. One of the things we check is if you are using a LDAP within your system profile or your organization, and we check your certificate management on that. If it doesn't validate, the upgrade will fail on that. So, and there is one issue that we identified where you could actually have the certificate in the profile, but turn off SSL on the LDAP configuration, and it still persists the SSL configuration. So that will be rectified in a future patch, but it's an easy workaround. So.
But it's still surprising. I had, especially around LDAP, also, I still have discussions with service providers about them not being able to turn on LDAP-S, where it's like you need to, really that you are transferring some interesting stuff here in an unencrypted form if you don't turn this on.
Yeah, and again, it's about certificate handling and verifying the host name, right? So just be prepared. I think it warrants a conversation to understand what are you using from authentication. And again, I see it kind of, I hate to say corner case, but if you're using clear text LDAP calls, right? I'm sure it's just in a lab, I would hope. So, but here we are.
It would be good if we could clearly say it's just lab environments, but I heard so many stories about that this is the most secure network interface behind it, and that there is absolutely nothing to worry about. It's like, really? Okay. But anyways.
So there's one more thing that is clearly documented in the release notes, so you are all aware because you all read the release notes before upgrading, right? When it comes to the Tanzu Kubernetes script integration, there's some incompatibility with Vcenter 7 update 2a and 2b with existing environments. So just make sure, again, to read the release notes and check the compatibility metrics before upgrading any component that is somehow part of your cloud offering.
But people would never upgrade without reading release notes and checking the interop metrics. That never happens. Not even in a lab environment. Anyway. Yeah,
I, in that same vein, as Jörg said, I would, if you're running TKG, don't upgrade to 702 right now for vCenter and vSphere. So.
Yeah, there are still a few surprises. However, this cloud Tanzu stuff is interesting. So I was running a class a few days ago, and the beauty of cloud is that it instantaneously changes. But the bad part is if you have a lab guide written for 15 people and which worked fine on Friday, and on Monday morning you start a class and all of a sudden nothing is where it was before again. So that's the beauty part of the cloud, but not actually with Cloud Director. Good. So as we are hitting the head of the time, let's start with a round of closing words and celebrating 10.3. I would say it sounds like we don't have any major issues except the stuff which we should have cleaned out already anyhow on our certificates, etc. But I think we see a lot of progress and everything else. Romain, any closing words on why you think from a networking perspective, people should actually upgrade to 10.3 and not wait for it anymore?
Well, you have the obvious elephant in the room, like dynamic groups with distributed firewall and edge firewall, via edge, RV support. But they also added a lot of small enhancements that makes the UI less confusing. So you can now assign primary IP for the gateways. You can have UI configuration for IPv6. You can define the edge cluster for services. There are a lot of small enhancements, which all of them combined makes the usage of the product easier for service providers.
You don't steal the thunder from everyone. You barely left any features for everybody else. Jörg, what's your reason why you think 10.3 upgrade should be applied?
Yeah, of course, if you are using VRO, you got the full functionality of the input presentation back. And also don't skip all the small notes in the release notes. There have been a lot of smaller improvements to the UI that we haven't really discussed here because yeah, it's hard to discuss on a podcast about UI features. But you can do, for example, customizable keyboards, shortcuts in the tenant portal, and some improved quick search and global search. So these are small features, but they are, when you get used to use them, they allow you to pretty efficiently navigate through the Cloud Director portal.
Good point. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dot release, but there's, I mean, a lot of significant new functionality released and brought in here. You know, again, to commend on the user interface and user experience team, they've really added in really abbreviated things. I've noticed a performance improvement on the clarity interface too. So I know that they're always optimizing that going forward. So it's, definitely check it out.
Good. So that means you finally you completely understood how the versioning of Cloud Director works. As you said, this is just a dot release, because since 5.6, maybe we should do another session on how the version numbering of VCD actually worked. From 5.5 to 10.3, there were a few weird steps in between, I would say. But anyhow.
What are you talking about? We flip a coin and we like just, you know, guess a number what we're going to increment up to, right? That's how we do it, right? You work, Romain? Yes, work with product management and say what sounds good.
Toby, what would you put on the list?
Yeah, as mentioned before, and also as mentioned by Daniel, people should start to think about all of the SSL stuff, because it more and more becomes important. As we have seen, if the certificate name is not matching for NSX, you really run into an issue, which is fine by default, because VMware really shouted out often enough nowadays that, hey, guys, please start to use certificates. Sometimes they are a little bit heavy to install, but okay, this is something you need to do. Lots of improvement related to the distributed firewall, which are really cool, and especially what I'm really impressed is how easy troubleshooting can be related to vCloud Director and distributed firewall, with handing over all of the necessary information.
Good. Matthias, I know certificates is high on his list.
Yeah, certificates is top notch on my list. I would say, guys, check on your workflows and all the automation you did, either VRO or PowerShell or whatever, and verify the REST API authentication mechanism, and make sure to change the JWT and the authorization header mechanism instead of using the old session-based one, just to make sure that your calls work in the future.
Good. I think that's a good summary. It was a great feature list. We are still looking for topics for one of the next sessions. We have a few items we are going to cover. Potentially, we are going to talk about availability or one of the other big features, or we might actually ask someone from the Terraform team to join us at one of the next calls or something else. So there is still a lot of topics, but you can influence which topics we cover next. Write us either on Twitter or any of the other social media platforms. Don't forget to subscribe to either the podcast or the video stream on YouTube, or if you have any questions, same way as always. And with that being said, everybody, wish you a next wonderful month and talk to you all again in 1 month's time. Have a good one. Bye.
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 Bye.